Okay, this is going to be a video about, or this is, I hope, a video about making a corporate model. I've made too many videos lately, perhaps focused on project finance, and there's some different issues in corporate finance, and often in the past I haven't kind of gone through some of the credit analysis, some of the nuances with exchange rates, and some of the new ways that you can read data into a file now. Um, I'm going to show you a little bit of this model. I probably need to make it a little larger. If you use this generic macros and just want to change the size, if you want to make everything 100% and make it 10, you can change that and make it Calibri, whatever that is. Is that making it worse? Whatever. It just works through every sheet and just does the formatting for however you want it, of course. Now, here's the story behind this one. A really nice man was working with me, and we just did that help. I don't know if it helped. We put the things in, and he said, "Okay, well, he got this forecast from kind of his company, maybe he's on the board of directors or something like that, and they gave a forecast, and it was all kind of arranged a lot differently, and they gave some history and forecast with this forecast for revenues. So unlike all of those other kind of examples I might show you, we have some real forecasts. And then the first thing I said was, get me some historic financial data. And he was able to go and get me data all the way back from 2014 to 2021. And at some point we did a little analysis where the first thing I would look at is press. I'm telling myself what to press. They had some problems here, and then they have started to recover. And he gave me all these reasons why they had problems. Of course, the pandemic is always the best excuse. I shouldn't have said that. It is a good excuse for everything in your life, probably. And then they're going to they're going to have a little bit of a capital expenditure program to get things ready. And he was able to give me the capital expenditure program, I believe. So then we went through and we used the revenue assumptions. And I'm going to take you through this a little bit more slowly and discuss some classic corporate modeling issues, as well as a little bit on how to get data and what happens if you have, in this corporate model, what happens if you have, well, in this case, we made two different currencies. And in this case, the loans, often when I would explain a corporate model, I would say, let's just throw it into one loan. Let's throw all the debt together. But there were all these loans in different currencies. It might seem fairly clear to you on how to do this, but I'm just trying to think about that last EBITDA. It was pretty increased. I can't remember if that was an actual or some kind of projection. This would be really important to you. And I think what we did then is to say, okay, let's look at some different cases. I'm not going to change the cases. And let's see if we make a new loan, what kind of assumptions would it take to repay the loan? So this is kind of using a corporate model in credit analysis. Now, I better not mention any names, but this man that I had in our little class was so wonderful. He said, I used to do project finances. Corporate finance is just such a bunch of mush and magic potion and vague kind of assumptions compared to project finance, and it is. How do you really evaluate what things like the cost of goods sold relative to the sales, or the cost of goods sold percentage is? So if we make the cost of goods percent up, then we can't really pay off the loan. At least we can demonstrate that, and in a way crosses the bridge between corporate finance and project finance. So that's a little bit of an introduction. If I sound a little tired today, I am, because I've been working on, I'm so proud of myself for being able to, I'm an old man and I've never really painted a house before. So here's, I put this floor in. Look at this floor. That's what I've been doing. That's why I'm tired. It took me a long time. Okay, let's get back to this. Then don't yell at me. I can tell people that, I have okay, I'm getting in trouble for saying things that are inappropriate. Okay. Now, why don't we? No. Let me just show you something else, which is really this in terms of Excel and in terms of files that I work on. This is kind of, for me, a really big one. Now, in the past, I've put this on I've discussed this, I've put this on all sorts of websites, and got really excited about it. And right now, here's this what you can, this is in terms of, for a corporate model, getting historic data for a corporate model. And there's a lot of indirect functions in this program. So when you open it, and it's called, this one's, I've got a whole bunch of these, but this one, I guess I called it Malaysia and some other stocks. So here's what you do. And you can put in, this is a company in Portugal. This is a company in France. This is a company, EasyJet, in US. And if you go to two different websites, okay, one is a Market Watch. So you know how to do that, but I'll put EasyJet. Okay, and then, oops, I didn't spell it right. Okay, and then when you do that, you get this stuff. And down here somewhere, where's my, I went past it, didn't I? It down here, it has financials. And when you would take these financials right here and make a little program that says, get me the annual income statement, or you click on this and it has a little bit of a different URL. It says balance sheet. You notice it says country code UK. Okay, and number one, you can get it's changed dramatically since the last time I did it, and I changed the file around, and I don't know if I have to really go through all the details, but you just grab this with this workbooks.open method that I've talked about way too much probably. You make a little macro that says workbooks.open, and you put a range, and you put this the reference to this URL here, and then you put the ticker symbol in. You disembobulate this URL. That's not a word. And then you put a new thing in, and you recombine the URL, and you have to put the country code in, and then you can get all of this thing. Now it says B for billions, M for millions, and I made a little not so complicated UDF, user defined function, that fixes all of that. Okay, and the problem with this one, then you can get the cash flow, and you can get it quarterly and everything else. So you put the URL in here, and then somewhere down here and it's changed so dramatically because you can get so many more companies from all of these different places, and then it puts the income statement down here in a complete mess with all the B's and all that, and the balance sheet, and the quarterly balance sheet, and there's a little one that says, here's Apple company. That's a little bit bigger company, I suppose. And we go downstairs and get it, and then you use match, index, and indirect. Match, index, indirect, match, index, indirect. If somebody says, oh, I'm cool, I use match, index, you say, haha, I'm cooler, I use indirect plus match and index, and it slows me down a little bit, but I can do things. There's no other way. I can't find another another way to do it. Let me just put it like that. And then you're not finished. Unfortunately, this market watch, you can't get the stock prices from. And you want to combine those historic financials. I noticed Yahoo does that a little bit now. It does some of that for you. But what we want to do is we want to get the data ourselves, like Bloomberg or something, but we don't want to pay for Bloomberg. Oh my God, no. We want to get the data ourselves for different companies. Okay, I'm going to get it for the one we just looked at. And we can get quickly financial statements for both annual and quarterly analysis, and then you can put them together with a little bit of tiny creativity with your timelines, so you can have a timeline just in like project finance where you have an annual, you might have monthly during construction and semi-annual after construction. You can have a historic period that's annual, then quarterly, and then however you want to do your forecast, a different timing. Getting that timing right is crucial in every single model. Okay, and then when the only other thing is the market watch doesn't really have good data on stock prices. Yahoo.finance is just a dream, except they've changed it for the S&P 500. They made it a little tiny trickier to get monthly data on the S&P 500 back to 1926, which they had before. And then if we want to do a little bit of analysis, now I'm going to come back to that other model. I'm just giving you a tiny little kind of overview that I might give to others. If we look at Apple, and once we get all that data, you can just make your own spinner boxes and graphs and everything else. If we look at their stock price and look at their EBITDA, this is just kind of amazing. The EBITDA, well, okay, it went up and down, and this EBITDA produced a 26 stock price, and now it produces a 95 stock price. And there are a lot of companies like this, I think. And how do you explain this? Now, I suppose if the one we just looked at, if you want to compare the return on equity, maybe, because the return on equity is growing and the earnings are growing. This is exactly what all the moaning maybe is about. The earnings aren't growing that much, and whatever. How are our revenues doing? So you can make all of these nice little comparisons. I think they're nice. Nobody will download this file, and I'm going to cry. But you can get this. Now, I use this file to compute the cost of capital, so I'm going to come back to it. We can look at Amazon for a minute. I'm just so curious about this Amazon. Here are their revenues exploding and their stock price exploding. Unlike Apple, their EBITDA has really gone up. Okay, but and their return on invested capital has also gone up. So this would be a case study in the basics of finance. You want to earn a good return and you want to grow it. Oops, we kind of had an outlier here, but if you look way in the past, this has been down. They started to really get a pretty good return on invested capital, and then you can grow. If you can grow your business with that return on invested capital, you've got something. There are two ways kind of to compute it. We could, in this case, they were just about the same. But then, if you look at their capex, and this is kind of the interesting thing. You see these Amazon trucks all over the place. At least I do. I hate them. And I shouldn't have said anything. You guys like to order on Amazon. The actual cash flow here, the capex were more than the EBITDA, and you can say, oh my gosh, what's going on? Are you have to spending so much money to get your EBITDA to go up? But maybe it's just a one-time kind of thing. And if you can keep growing by making capex and you can grow that return, all the better for you. Okay, and now let's look at one other company. Let's look at Next Era. And they have a stock price that is gone up like the rest of them. Okay, but their return on invested capital was junk. And maybe it's because they're growing and the returns are low, or maybe it's just a bubble in companies that are really into a lot of renewables. Where is my return on invested capital? Okay, here's the return on invested capital. Not very exciting, but still the stock price goes up. So the whole reason I digressed, and I can see people really giving me shit about this. I'm not supposed to swear anymore, yelling at me about not getting to the point. But this is the point. You can go to this file, grab all the financial data. Now let's talk about just a couple of things involved in a real corporate model, and I think focusing just a little bit on a few of these mechanics may or may not help. So when we like I said, we got the revenues. You want to show all of these. You want to get it down to quantity and price, so you can really try to evaluate some of these assumptions, which I found a little bit difficult to do, and somehow make some of those graphs that I just showed you, make some graphs that show the history and the forecast and isolate. These didn't work really very well. Where are the revenues coming from, and are they reasonable? I'm going to skip through the scenarios. In the historic financials, again, I tried to say I would put all the historic financials and stop with the history. I would throw them at the top of a page or put them in a separate page. And then everything after that could be different. The mistake I have made in corporate modeling is trying to get some sort of formula, some sort of bureaucratic kind of method to do it, which is absolutely absurd. I think one of the things that seems to work fairly well is to put in all of your macroeconomic data up first, and the most crucial thing you can do, I've said this again and again and again, I really cannot understand if you have a corporate model not having a flag with the dates where you switch from the history to the forecast. I call it a magic flag because I used to make corporate models without this flag. In fact, sometimes I've seen corporate models even without the kind of dates on the top. You once you have this historic flag, there's so much left in this history. Now, for example, I put the historic revenues here, and then we can present the historic revenues right next to the forecast revenues, and you can see, well, what happens. Is there a big jump in the revenues? And I'm tempted to go here, and it would be nice if when you insert one of these spark lines, which I'm not going to do, when you insert one to show the history and the forecast together, and maybe that's just too obvious, but you want to make, and I've made some other graphs about that, videos about it. Okay, and so once you have that, then you better, if you're going to compute the cost of goods sold, you better take the depreciation out of it if depreciation is in it, and you'd have to make some kind of adjustment. And then again, I tried to put some of the forecasts, and let's see what happened here. Well, when they were having their problems here in 2018, what a disaster. We'd have to investigate that. The cost of goods sold was really high. They've been able to bring that down. Can they continue bringing it down, or should we make another assumption? And so, of course, I'm not going to, for once, show you, okay, go back and forth, put these little spinner boxes in. Now, what I have done is I'm going to close this sheet. That was really one of my objectives in making this video, to show, I hope one person will look at this one day. You're going to put the automatic, and then of course you can just do some sensitivity analysis, and that's exactly what I showed. But when you make your forecast, and I spelled forecast wrong. Well, somebody told me, there's a really good modeler who doesn't make spelling mistakes. I would be a really bad modeler then. And you notice that there's a simple if statement, and this if statement refers over and over and over again to the historic year. And then you can, whenever I go to admin in general, I try to figure out what's fixed and variables, and it's all very difficult to do, and you make a little scatter plot. And I don't think I did it here, so I'm going to skip that one. I was just tempted. That's why I was tempted to do it for a minute here. And then you get to the PP&E. And the PP&E and the CapEx, that's a little tricky. Now, my friend who asked me these questions and came from project finance to corporate finance, he kind of says, how in the heck can I make, if I have a company and they don't give me their CapEx forecasts, how can I do this? And if I'm making some kind of simplistic sales forecast to figure out what some financial ratios are going to be in a corporation, like debt to EBITDA, FCF to net debt, all that, when I do those kind of ratios to understand whether we can, what kind of downside conditions would lead to me, to the company not being able to refinance the debt, it's such a tougher kind of thing than just looking at cash flow. How do you compute the CapEx? And the only thing I could say is that, look, we can make a little ratio of it, depending on the lifetime of the project and the lifetime of the assets and the growth rate, you can compute the ratio of capex to depreciation. You can compute a theoretical number, at least, that would allow them to generate the growth. It's certainly not perfect, and coming a little bit from project finance, I try to get these things exact, and it's so hard. So what we do is we start with the balance sheet net plant. So we've only got the history. And we've got the historic depreciation, and you've got some historic capex. You can do a little bit of capex to revenues. You better, if you start changing revenues in general, you'd think you'd have some capex to support this. You know, one of the things I keep saying is I found another thing. If you're going to make EBITDA, if you're going to make some cash flow, it's hard for me to think of ways you can make cash flow without making some sort of investment. Investment in time, investment in money, investment in gambling. If you gamble, you're going to have to put some money down. Maybe you'll get some out. I doubt it. If you're going to go to university, you're going to have to make an investment in time and money, maybe parents' money, and then you're going to get return. If you have a business and your business is playing games with the computers, you have to make an investment in time and computer equipment. Everything has an investment. And if we're going to grow faster, we're going to have to make a bigger investment. That's it. How could you not have this in a corporate model? So then we get a depreciation rate and struggle on how to get the capex. It is an enormous struggle. And one of the things, if somebody tells you there's some magic formula, there's some simple way to do this, there's one right way to do this, and I used to kind of do some of that, that's the worst possible thing you can do. But the biggest thing I wanted to tell you is that you make a little bit of a long formula, but it's really not very big. You say, if it's the historic switch, we're going to take the balance from the balance sheet. But if it's not the historic switch, we're going to take the opening balance plus the capex minus the depreciation. And in that way, we can get this nice, smooth transition on things like on balance sheet items that go from the balance sheet in the historic period forward. Okay, and so this is all a historic net PP&E. And if somebody's saying, why don't you get to the point? Well, that's one of the big points in corporate modeling. Another one is getting good historic data. Another one is once we have another financial statement for 2022 or something, I guess their fiscal year was pretty early because they're growing things or something. Then you can get this in, just change the switch over here, and then you've got another historic period. Of course, you're going to have to go through a lot of the assumptions and revisit the assumptions, but the mechanics of the model will all be there. And then you do the same sort of thing. You first work through the key items on the profit and loss statement, whether it's a company where you've got real kind of detailed information from management and doing it inside the company, or whether you're from the outside and you really don't have anything. The other thing my friend asked, he was a brilliant question. What in the heck do I do with taxes? This one, okay, well, we have minus 53. We take the pre-tax income and divide the taxes on the profit and loss by the pre-tax income, and it varies all over the place. What should we do? And another thing I said, this would be the worst thing I could do, was to give you some sort of fake answer that you might find in some kind of McKinsey book or something else. What a lot of crap. You're going to have to make an assumption and use some judgment. It's, again, not like project finance where you can work through every detail of the taxes. And then we can put in some working capital, some cash balance, some working capital. I'll come back to the cash balance. And of course, you put in the history, and then you've got the revenues from upstairs, and then you've got the projected revenues. And you just work through the balance sheet and the income statement. For me, one way or another, you're going to have to do that. And you've done basically everything that gets to invested capital. You haven't put any financing in yet, but it's everything related to the invested capital. And then you can go and make your projections. Now, in a project finance model, when you make your projections, I hope, I hope you wouldn't start with a profit and loss. And I hope you wouldn't say, I'm going to make I'm pretty cool. I'm going to make a 3-statement model, something like that. And you'd start with a profit and loss statement as your first analysis. Please don't do that. We start with really working through all our assumptions and getting some of the balance sheet items related to invested capital right. And then in this case, we're going to use the model for credit analysis, and we're going to put a few different debt issues in. And just like you put multiple debt issues in project finance, you put an opening balance and a closing balance, and I put some existing loans. You put your existing loans here, and you get the balance sheet amount, and somewhere, yes. This is a reconciling. I should find where I'm doing this. Why have I not got some total debt balance? I need to put the total debt balance in. Well, I see. We didn't have the forecast till later. So you can put excuse me for doing that, but you can put all the historic balance of the debt in here. And this time we divided it into a few different debt issues, and we put a new debt issue for 10 million US, and then we have to do a little bit of currency conversion. And when you get, if you're going to make a corporate model or a project finance model, I hate the translation adjustments. And all I can say on the translation adjustments is you better get the percent change in the exchange rate, and you use that percent change in the exchange rate and put somewhere the translation adjustments in. Where did I put the translation? Here we go. Here's a translation adjustment. Where is it filled in? Here. Okay, and let me see if we can show it. This was horrible a little bit what I said. I said 1 minus the exchange rate. And that's what you do. And you multiply it by the opening balance. And I can never forget. Remember this? I never forget. And so on my website, let's see if we can go to here, in both the project finance and the corporate finance section, I have a section on the and I'm a little bit embarrassed, of course. I've got to find this, and I'm gonna have to. Oh, this is a shit. Just a minute. Okay, so am I recording first? A lot of times I've been teaching classes and I forget to share the screen. Here, if you go to project finance, you go to actuals, currency, and funds. Oh, come on. Oops. I don't know how to make some of these things. Currency adjustments. Okay. And this one, it works through step by step by step. In fact, I might have even used this file. No, I used a little different one. Step by step, how to work through and make the currency adjustments if you've got one file or another file and you're using forward interest rates and so forth. So those are all, it's a horrible thing to do, but once you do it, it's kind of just a mechanical thing. You can follow it, I hope. And then, so we got all the debt issues. And then, just like in this case, when I'm really doing a credit analysis, I'm saying, okay, we put a profit and loss statement and they're going to make a new loan. And then we're going to make a cash flow statement. And you could make your cash flow statement any way you'd like. No stupid rules. But when you get your cash flow statement, if you want to really evaluate what the potential to pay this debt off in a worst case, you can work through just like you would do kind of anything. I would start with the direct method, go through EBITDA, put all the interest charges, including the interest which comes from that debt facility above, put all those in, get all your cash flow from investing, and get all your interests from all the other debt. Okay, and then you're going to have your scheduled debt repayment. And if the cash flow is negative because we've put in some new capex here, we're going to fund those capex just with a minimum function, a maximum and a minimum function that I've gone through way too many times probably. This is just, we're going to fund it when when it's a projected period again, and we're going to fund it when the cash flow is negative. We're going to make it almost like a kind of a working capital. And then we're going to go through the next one, and we could have all sorts of different ways to repay the debt, but if you want to do the most fundamental kind of cash flow analysis, and that might be okay for this one, we can say, well, how much cash flow will you generate when you make some sensitivity analysis with some revenue assumptions and all that? You'd work through all the revenues, and then you can see what's left over. And then you can put shareholder loans, whatever you want, and finally you'll get a net change in cash. And just like, it's almost like the kind of cash sweeps you would make in in any kind of project model. I'm sorry if I'm keeping on talking to the relationship between corporate models and project finance models. Then you just consider cash as negative debt, and you go through, as usual, you go through a historic period and you use the magic flag to get the historic period until you get the future period. And in the future period, it's the opening balance plus any, what happened there? Any cash flow that's kind of available. And then, so down here, we have some cash flow available. And this was since is not in, it's not in a major currency, it's in a different currency. I'm not supposed to tell, I suppose. Then you go downstairs, and eventually you get the joy of balancing the balance sheet. And as normal, just about all the accounts except the equity account should be defined. And for the equity account, you'd make the opening balance and the closing balance, and the closing balance will be a classic if statement. If it's the historic period, then take the balance sheet. Otherwise, the opening plus the closing balance. So I'm going to stop now. I have a few objectives, and I've wanted to get this video to you for a while. There's a man I'm working with now who says, what in the hell is wrong with you? Why are you just making videos? Why aren't you trying to get yourself a really big house? And I said, I don't know. That's just me. I don't know. Maybe I've got a psychological hang up, something like this. And the points I want to make in this video for you are the following. Ask for the resource library, or look on the website and find this thing for databases, and this thing called Comprehensive Financial Database. And you can download just about so many more different companies, and then go mess around with it. Make your own graphs. Evaluate the historic financial statements before you ever get started with anything, to try to figure out what's the story behind this and what's the historic kind of picture you would build. Once you have the history defined, my next kind of big point is, of course, I'm repeating this one, but make a nice little timeline, whether it's annual or anything else, make a little historic timeline and get the financials in, and I'd probably put them in separately, and then make all your assumptions and simply work down the profit and loss, and there are no rules about how you should use lookup functions or average if functions when you want to do some of this. It's whatever, but you work your way through it, and you get all the operations essentially defined, and that includes the trickiest one perhaps, which is the depreciation and the capex, and some taxes, some working capital. And then when you put your financial statements together, again, not a rule, but for me it kind of works, is you put the you put the cash and the loans, and this can be a lot more complicated than just globbing all the debt into one loan and all the cash into one cash account. You can put them separately, put different repayments in, and then finally grab the data from this is, if it's red, it comes from the red sheet and all that, and I guess I can say, oh, this came from this one, and it came from the assumption sheet, and I could find it. Press the F5 and go back. That worked. Whew, I was really afraid of that. That's alternate U with this generic macros, and I promised since I made that and nobody looks at it, I'd make it, but I'm 41 minutes into this video, so there's not one person who's probably watched this far. And I'm finished. And then once you have this, you've got some cash flows, and see how much cash flow is left. And work in this case, work through a cash flow waterfall. In another case, you might pay the dividends and say, if it's a public company, they better pay some dividends or they're gonna implode. So you can put all sorts of different things in, be completely creative, and then make the balance sheet. And I think that's enough.